Hi everyone, Dr. Huff here, and in this PowerPoint I'm going to be covering with you the negative constructive versus the affirmative constructive that you had to do in the last module. And you're going to find that a lot of this is very similar because there are very similar responsibilities. However, there are some unique differences to the negative constructive speech that I will cover with you now. So just as a reminder, here again is the order of the debate. Make sure that you familiarize yourself with this because you will be needing this when we get to the actual debates later on in this semester. But you will note here that the negative constructive speech happens after the negative cross-examines the affirmative. So the affirmative gives their constructive speech for 2.5 minutes. Negative asks questions for a minute. And now it's time for the negative constructive speech, which is a 3-minute speech. So in terms of the overview for the negative constructive speech, you'll see here that the first parts of it are exactly the same as the affirmative. It begins with an opening statement quotation, then statement of the resolution, definitions, the value and criterion, contentions, but then the negative also has what's called refutation, which means pushing back or arguing against the different contentions that the affirmative gave. And so remember that our resolution, our sample resolution, is Congress should refuse to build a border wall. Now, you're on negative in this case, which means that because the topic is Congress should refuse to build a border wall, the negative side is going to be arguing that the border wall should be built. So opening statement quotation, just a reminder that the purpose is to get the audience's attention. And so here is a sample opening quotation for the negative side of this topic. Planning to scale a 30-foot steel slatted barrier is a daunting challenge. The same goes for digging under or breaking through. This isn't to argue that a wall is completely impenetrable given the right equipment, but to state the obvious, a barrier is far preferable to an open space, where migrants can simply walk across. Agreeing with this, the negative stands firmly against the resolution. So you might remember that when we went through the affirmative stands for the resolution. And in this case, because it's negative, it's firmly against. So then you state the resolution. Resolved, Congress should refuse to fund a border wall. Now, when it comes to definitions, remember that the affirmative has provided some definitions up front. As the negative, remember that you have the ability to provide your own definitions, but for the most part, you can agree with the affirmative's definitions as long as they were fair and simply say, I agree with the affirmative's definitions. However, if you do disagree with any of the affirmative definitions, don't hesitate to offer your own, but most of the time, the affirmative has been fair in their definitions, so to save you some time in this speech, you can simply agree with those provided. And then after the definitions, remember that we have the value and the criterion. So remember, the value is what you want to uphold in the debate as an ideal. I had also, provided the sample list of different values in the last module. I also am providing it in this module. But just a few values here listed below. Remember, democracy, health, justice, life, liberty. And then remember that the criterion is the weighing mechanism for the round, giving the audience a way to measure if your side of the debate is more persuasive and achieves your value. And remember, for purposes of the class, there's only 2 criterion we're going to use this semester: comparative advantage and utilitarianism. So remember that the value and criterion are presented together as observation 2. And in this case, I've given you sample value and criterion for the negative side. The supreme value for this debate should be safety. As quoted on the National Safety Council homepage, accessed February 25, 2019, safety applies with equal force to the individual, to the family, to the employer, to the state, the nation, and to international affairs. Safety, in its widest sense, concerns the happiness, contentment, and freedom of mankind. The criterion for today's round should be utilitarianism. Whichever side of the debate creates the greatest good for the greatest number should take today's round. And then remember that you will transition to your arguments or your contentions by stating, I shall further uphold this value and criterion throughout my contentions. So just remember that contention is just a fancy word for argument, And just like the affirmative as the negative, you're going to present two contention arguments for the audience that are specific to your side. Remember that these need to be researched, and in your source citation, make sure to include the author or authors, the source or publication, and the date of publication or access. So sample contentions for the negative. Contention 1. Hundreds of thousands of non-vetted immigrants cross the southern border annually. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, February 19, 2019, although illegal border crossings have declined sharply the past 2 decades, in 2018 alone, 400,000 illegal immigrants crossed at the Mexican border. The article continues that this is not a vendetta against or picking on Mexico. While the vast majority of apprehended individuals in previous years were Mexican migrants, an increasing number, about 1 in 3, are now asylum seekers from Central America's Northern Triangle, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. Contention 2. Illegal and non-vetted status leaves immigrants vulnerable. With an illegal status in this country comes blocked access to some basic services. For example, the Kaiser Family Foundation, February 15, 2019, indicates that illegal immigrants are 4 times less likely to have access to health care and basic health services. This leads to lower life quality and expectancy for immigrants, as well as children of illegal immigrants at higher risk for developing preventable diseases and illness. Now here, after your second contention, you transition by stating, "Now on to my opponent's case." So this is where it's very different than the affirmative, because not only did you have to provide your own arguments in the speech, but because the affirmative already has some arguments out there on the table, you now have to address those. Note that the following refutation points are also researched. In contention 1, she refers to half of illegal immigrants arriving coming to the U.S. legally via airports and overstaying their visas. But this very fact is damning to the affirmative case. That means the other half is coming through other means, particularly the southern border. Remember from my contention 1 that in 2018, 400,000 illegal immigrants crossed through the southern route. For example, CNN News reported on January 29, 2019, that several busloads of migrants were dropped right off at the southern border to cross in the United States via Arizona. In contention 2, my opponent asserts arrests have declined and are continuing to decline. However, you will note that my opponent used data from 2018. According to the Washington Examiner, February 25, 2019, January 2019 border apprehensions at the southern border jumped 84% compared to January 2018, which could predict a surge to 600,000 illegal immigrants by year's end. While no solution is perfect, a wall protects U.S. safety and protects the safety of illegal immigrants that would become vulnerable if they cross the border for an undocumented status. Then for the negative constructive, to end it, you want to let the audience and opponent know you're finished, just like you did with the affirmative, and simply state, "I am now open for cross-examination." So to review the negative constructive, again, we start with the opening statement quotation, we give the resolution, definitions, the value criterion, our own contentions, and then refutation against the affirmative. So what I want you to do, just like you did for the last module, is to review the sample negative constructive brief that I provide, and also watch the sample demonstration of the negative brief for the negative construction that I give for you in the module as well. Take care.